Okay, welcome. Yes, we are recording today. I want to start by reviewing a little bit and then introducing some new materials. Based on what we've seen on the homework, there's a couple of questions about what's the difference between periods, binary forms, and so forth. So I wanted to remind you on page 469, there's a wonderful description and summary of all of the different kinds of periods. Go to those two pages, 469 and 70 in the Late's text. You have a period labeled with 3 words. The first word is either parallel or contrasting. The second word is either continuous, sectional, or progressive. And of course, the last word is simply period. All right? And usually, when we're talking about periods, we're talking about 8 measures, something like that. Right? So if you have something that has an A and an A prime, it's going to be parallel. If it's an A and a B, it's going to be contrasting. What the little letters mean, you're talking about thematic material. Okay. And then when it's talking about harmonic motion, and you move to those other terms up there. Scroll down a little bit. There's a nice chart showing all the possibilities. The parallel interrupted is probably the most common. The CIP is rare if it exists at all. It kind of doesn't make sense to have an interruption if you have a contrasting thematic material. Those are the first 4, and then of course the next page shows the next 4. So just figure out, you need to figure out harmonically what's going on down here, and for the second word, and then thematically what's happening to figure out the first word. And then when it comes to the binary forms, this is on page 593. Here's a summary of all the binary forms. And we describe binary usually with 2 words, sometimes 3. It's either sectional or continuous, depending on if it ends on tonic or if it ends away from tonic. Both of these binary form types end on tonic. Okay? The one additional word you might use, and this dotted line is not in the textbook. I've separated out the balance from the other 2. Simple or rounded refer to the different kinds of thematic material. If you're balanced, you can sort of see these little squares here showing the end of the first section matches the end of the second section. And you may have something that has simple, right, or rounded, and also be balanced. So you could have a little part over here that's the same as that. So you may have something that's balanced as well as simple. So do go to those pages, refresh the memory, and become familiar with that. Next thing I want to mention is that we have talked about the talked about the Late's textbook that defines the 7-part rondo, as you see up there. There are several other books on analysis of form. One of them, for example, is the one by William Kaplan called Classical Form. And he defines the 7-part rondo differently from Late's. He doesn't use B1 or B2, he just uses B, C, and D. So that all 3 of those episodes are not related. Okay? You can see how they sort of match up here. And what Late's calls the 7-part rondo, which is what we have been looking at up until now, Kaplan calls a sonata rondo. And you'll see this term come up, and you've been listening so far to many examples of what he calls a sonata rondo. If you remember the mapping of the sonata, you have the 3 parts: exposition, development, or recapitulation. And here is the mapping in red of the rondo portion, whereby the A1, B1, A2 are underneath the exposition. The C could be very extensive development section, and then the A3, B2, and A4 are the recapitulation. So what I'd like to do today is see an example of the Kaplan 7-part rondo. And so you have in your score, if you haven't picked up the scores off of the piano up here, please do get those. There are score examples for Mozart and Beethoven. And I have to somewhat apologize, Mozart looks like it's blank. That's simply because when I copied these down from IMSLP, the beginning of the page contained the previous movement, so I had it all redacted, and that's why I took a blank spot there. So the rondo begins at the bottom of that first page, and we're going to go ahead and listen to this, and I will scroll through this as you're listening. And I have a suggestion for you, since you'll be doing this for the final exam, as you're listening to these things, you can tell right away that this is a main theme right here. If you look at it, you might be able to tell how it sounds in your head. In this particular case, the top line is the clarinet part. It's in a different key from everybody else because it's a transposing instrument. So keep in mind, what you see here is actually going to sound a major second lower. That first note is not a sound, doesn't sound like a C, it sounds like a B flat. Okay. And you may be able to tell, you may not be able to tell, but if there's an introduction, that would not be the main theme. I can tell you right now, there's no introduction here, so hear this sort of theme in your head, sort of memorize it, and you can label it right away as the A1. When you see this come back, there's a good chance that it may be the A2 section. And just go ahead and write that while you're listening, because that means when you're done, oh, I have an A1 here, an A2 somewhere down the road, somewhere in the middle there has to be a B section. Okay, and it's probably going to be in a different key or mode. So, with that in mind, go ahead and listen to this. Let me pull off the, here it is. And make sure it's turned up. And there we go. that as a place where you go bowling. The rumor is that Mozart was just watching or playing a game while he was writing this, to do two things at once, I guess. Don't know, I wasn't there. It's a really nice piece. This is the third movement. It's even labeled as a rondo, so that's why you know it's a rondo. And you got the idea about the beginning phrase, and you can tell the whole thing is pretty much in E flat major. So, looking at those first 8 measures, what the kind of a period would you guess is those first 8 measures? Parallel interrupted period, very common. Not so bad. Now, how about 1 through 16? The same thing. Little tiny half cadence there. Sorry. By the time you get down to here, what kind of a cadence do you have right there? That's the PAC, right? And then you have a restatement of the theme, orchestrated a little bit differently. And same thing. Ornamented. Another PAC over here. What kind of a binary form would you guess?
Balance.
Balance also. What else? Say again. Sectional, definitely sectional. Not rounded. What else? Possibly. How about the thematic material? Pretty much the same. You have simple. You could use all of those terms, a balanced, simple sectional binary for those 16 measures. Is there a transition? No. There's no transition. It goes right from the end of this PAC into your B section there. So it starts right there in measure 17 with a new theme and a new key. What is that new key? B flat, which is how to relate to the tonic. It's 5. Right. Exactly right. Right. And then moving forward, looking for a retransition somewhere. The retransition, you're typically looking for some kind of a dominant. Since the key is in E flat, you're looking for something that emphasizes B flat. We're already in B flat. Do you see any clues up here that might indicate where the retransition starts?
Was it 43?
43? 43. You can see where you might want to think that the texture kind of changes right there. Piano playing almost all by itself for quite some time. For you pianists, you understand why you have to do all your scale work when you're playing Mozart in your arpeggios. One good place possibly to put your retransition. Any other place?
51.
51. Why would you choose 51 over 43? Yeah. And we talked about this trill kind of sets this up. You have your conventional 6/4, 5/6/4 going to your 5/7, nice big trill, and then PAC right there. The 51, and somewhere in there, you might see where 7th comes in, maybe not, kind of hard to tell. Anyway, where do you leave the A2 section that starts? 59. Sure. Here's your theme. Back in the tonic where it needs to be. Okay. So we've listened to that a couple of times. Now this is very clear change at where is this? C section. 67. There's a double bar. There's a repeat. There's a change of mode. It goes to what key does it go to? C minor, which is,
-6.
right, minor 6 from the original key. Great. Measure 73 through 76. Take a look. This little section out here, where do you suppose has been tonicized? What key? Very nice PAC at the end.
E flat.
E flat, which by the way happens to be the tonic. Right? It's very convenient. It is the relative major of C minor. The cadence there. Does he stay there? No. So we have a tonicization there. The next section begins in an E flat. It's all piano by itself. There's your 5/7 of C minor. And back to the where the viola kind of takes over there. And then the clarinet goes back to C minor. So that's just great. Measure 91. After measure 91, where's the first occurrence of a really strong chord of 5 in E flat major? No one. Oh, no, what? 101, that's pretty good. You have a nice little 5/1 here. It's an IAC, right? Because it's, well, I suppose if you go with the clarinet, you could call it a PAC. But you see this material?
Oh, 97.
Ah, right. You see how it occurs a little before there, and here is where you're a very strong sense of some kind of a change that's happening here. What would you call that section then? The retransition, right. I'm looking for a retransition. Okay. So, I'm retransitioning back to E flat, and where do you suppose the A3 section comes back? Say again? 108, yes, exactly right. It's in the viola part, it's an alto clef, so sorry for that. Those of you who are not viola players out too, most of you. So that is the exact same thing in the tonic. Go back to A3 there. Let's see. Is there a transition? There's the end of that viola theme starting in measure 114. Next thing. No, there's no transition. Excellent. And the D section starts right there. And it's in a different key. What key is this?
4.
Okay, great. It's a 4 compared to the opening, which is A flat major. It's very different theme. So there's your B and your C and your D, and you can see how all of them are different. So that's 4. How about measures 159 through 160? I'm looking for a special chord here. I bet you can guess what it is. There it is. Your augmented 6 is outlined right here. C flat up to A natural. Right? And he sort of hangs on that for quite some time. Finally resolving it to 5 of 5. Is there a retransition? And if so, where does it begin? It's very close to where we just were.
That's 163. 32.
Right before when I retransition, I like to do these 1:06. So where does it resolve?
161.
161. Not very clear. There's not a lot of notes there, but definitely you have this log limit 6 resolves here, and throughout this section, the rest of it. So I scroll this up a little bit. You have mostly just 5s and 1s and B flats. In the clarinet part. Make it faster. And finally, by the time you get to here, you add the 7. Bringing us back to the A4 section at 168. Right. I want to listen to this section from the A4, beginning of the A4 to the very end, and ask you to think about some questions. Where does the quota begin? I'm going to give you two choices, either 175 or 192. Make your decision and decide which one is better and why. So let's listen to this ending one more time. Go from the A4 section. So, which one do you think? 175 or 192?
192.
192, why? I'm hearing 192. Any reason?
Because the material is the part that starts at 175 comes back to the beginning material, whereas when it starts at 192, it doesn't really come back. It begins to close after that.
What I'm hearing is that you hear the opening to the theme, and you hear some sort of an interruption, and then the theme comes back.
And then after that, it's very closing. It doesn't really, it's like going away. It's not. You can tell it's not coming back at all.
By the time you get to 192, nothing comes back. Can you all see? Okay, just don't hit the camera. The theme in 168. Sort of Sturm und Drang section in here. Also, cannot play all that, and ending up on a sort of a pedal B flat, 5 of E flat, or several measures. And then an elaborated version of the theme back here, measure 185. And you right there on the PAC, and from that point on, we almost have entirely this little heartbeat tonic at the bottom. All the way through there. So yeah, you may be tempted when you see all of that fast stuff after the first phrase, let's say, of the theme, to say, oh, that's where the coda starts, but then you can see that this is much clearer. Okay. What did he change, by the way? I don't think this is important. Let's move on to the next thing. One last question. This theme close to the end here.
Do you need 2 more times, like, in the coda, or from where?
Ask me that question again.
It says, it appears 2 more times. You need just after 139, or do you need in the coda, or?
Yes, both.
Okay.
Starting at 139, the question is, in the clarinet, nice little 4-note coda, which is based on the theme also. Any other places where you see this come back?
161.
161 is one of them. It's transposed to the tonic. All right. And one more time, close to the end.
Cool.
There it is. Almost at the very end. He has an economy of forces. All right, rather lengthy piece of this.
Peter, wait.
Yes?
I missed number 3. Is there a transition, and where does the
No. This one up
Where
here.
does the B section start?
Right, and the B section starts at 17.
Oh, okay.
This runs right into it, no transition or anything. Any other questions on Kegelstadt?
So boring.
Right. Moving on to the Beethoven. This is another thing that has a sort of a rather large white part at the top. It says number 9 in E major. Excuse me, E major. I can see it starts right there with the theme, so that's your A1 section. This is a lot shorter. And it'll sound like this. the passage from measure 1 through 14, by the way, it starts in the middle of the measure, so, and sometimes the ends of the systems just have a measure that carries over, so the numbering looks a little funny. But from 1 up till 14, what would you call this binary form? 14, that's right, yeah.
Section.
Sectional,
Balance.
balanced. Balanced, simple, sectional, binary, not a problem. Okay. Are the two phrases identical? You have the first 8 letters there? Repeat it. And then he begins that next phrase. Is it identical? I mean, could he have just said, well, I'll just repeat it? Very close?
Yeah.
Identical?
Except for the very, very end.
What do you, there's a little difference. What happened at the end?
He doesn't repeat it twice, and it's, is it down?
You have this little thing that ends with the PAC here,
Yeah.
and then you go to a new key, and this is not part of it. So essentially, you ended here in measure 14. You should have ended in 16, right? If there were 8 measures times 2. So it's almost identical. He did measure 4, the same as here, but he didn't repeat it here, right, from measure 6 to 7 again. So we made a little change there. Is there a transition? Yes, there is. Where do you suppose that began?
14.
14, exactly right. I'm starting in the E major key and jumping to the next key, which you can tell almost right away with the A sharp in there. Where did that B1 section start, do you think? Yeah, 21 with a complete change of texture, change of dynamic, quite a bit slower, a little more lyrical, and clearly in B major, even with the F double sharp in there. Not to worry about that. So we're in B, which is going to the dominant. Is there a retransition back? Assuming that your next A section is here, your B section started up there, do you see a retransition up there? No. And don't just come back and say, yeah, there's one chord right here. Not really. You need a little more substance to a retransition than just one chord. Taking a look at this chord with the fermata over it, E major with the A in the bass. What is that chord? Not on minute 6. Yay, I know. Surprise.
See, yeah, 542.
It's a little louder.
542.
Of
E.
just plain old. Yeah, 542 is not 542 or 4 in this case. It's just in the key of E major. There's your root. The 7th is in the bass. And there's a good reason. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't ask Beethoven. But he might have had a reason for doing this 542 and then moving into the main theme. Any possible suggestions why?
So maybe back to the tonic.
Lead you back to the tonic. Why did they do root position?
We're been too strong. And it's in the middle of the piece.
Would have been too strong, perhaps. Looking for something related to the way the theme.
Oh, the way the chord resolves.
Yes, excellent. There's your chordal 7th resolving down, right, to a 1/6 chord rather than a really strong tonic chord. Excellent. Right. So A2 then starts right there on the second half of measure 30. Well, there you are. Is there a transition? And where does it start? If so.
Measure 38.
38's a little late. I want to go, no, I take it back, 38, no, I'm looking at the wrong question. Exactly right. What happened at 38? It sounds like the opening thing, right? But what did he change?
Oh, yeah, he went to the parallel line.
He went to the parallel line, right? Okay. And so 38. At the end of this, it's pretty complex here with the baseline and so forth. But he ends up on a D for a very long period of time on the bass. What do you think he's setting up here?
C section.
A C section, and that C section is in what key? Is how it starts. All right, excellent. I heard it. Flat 3. Now we're in E major. Why would he go to flat 3?
We went to E minor.
Went to E minor, which is the
Relative.
no,
Or parallel.
the parallel
It's
minor to the
relative
major,
to G.
and it's the relative to G. Excellent point. At Beethoven, I mean, he just went away from the norm, took a major sonata movement and went to the flat 3 key of G. And if you look at this passage, 47, I'm just going to reduce this into a bunch of chords per measure. You have this. What are you hearing there overall? A big what?
See?
Exactly. Sequence, you have 2 chords, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, and 3 different keys, moving up by step. Exactly. Right. And the more advanced classes, especially in the Kaplan, will talk about how the development section of sonatas tend to start with very long sequences like this. And this is like Kaplan's sonata rondo, so this would be like this development section. So it kind of makes sense.
So the sequence.
A big sequence, a large sequence. Right? Moving forward, there's a retransition in there somewhere. We're in E, yes.
You kind of lost me at that C section where you were talking about what he was going to. You're saying the flat 3 of G?
Flutter, yes. So if you're in E major,
Yeah.
I don't want to go to G major.
Oh, yeah, flat 3.
G major is flat 3
Right.
of E major, right?
Oh, I thought you were saying the flat 3 of G major.
No, G major is the flat 3 of E major. Yes.
Because it moves from A to the dominant in that situation, and then it goes to G major, right? In that
Yes.
case. Okay, gotcha.
He kind of got there by going from I think Andy said, from the major to the parallel minor, which is E minor, whose relative major is G.
Okay, gotcha.
So back to this question. There is transition in there? Yes, there is. Where do you think it starts?
76.
76. You can't miss it. There are huge footballs on the bass. Right? Huge retransition right there. And then where does A3 start? A3, after all of that stuff, after the fermata. He even gave us a key signature to indicate that. Great. Is there a transition here? There's a PAC at the end of the second system. How about what follows?
Yeah, I think so.
It sure does. It's going to take us to something a little different.
So where does the transition
So
start?
your read, so your transition then starts at 91. And it goes through until you get to this. Does this look familiar, this little thing here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah? What would you call that section there? Yeah, there's your B2. So you have the same melodic material that you had for the B1 section. Down there, they measure 98. However, it's in a strange key. What is that key? What's the very first note? It's A. It's kind of hard to tell out of context, but. PAC by the time you get down here in A major. Why didn't he go to keep this in tonic like he's supposed to in the sonata? He didn't. He went to the 4 chord instead. So this is A, and it's going to the 4. The rest of these questions, I know the clock's a little fast, let me get us through this. You can't really see it. Well, actually, you can see it, it's hard to hear it. But those last 2 measures up here, if I just stop there, there would be what? There's the augmented 6. When he changed it, right before he got back to the main theme for the next, the final section, 108, that's your A4 right there. And this question that I have here is what's the difference between the section 1 all the way to 111 and then 112 for the rest of this? Can you kind of describe what's going on? What did he do? Let me ask you a question. You see how the right hand is playing off beats on lots of keys in this section? What happens over here? Yeah, he did. He swapped. He basically just swapped hands. Very clever, I think. And finally, there's a couple of chords I want to look at. Measures 117 and 118. And this is the kind of thing you may have to answer on an exam. Starting on B3 at 117, you have this. Skin bass. A fully diminished 7, right? 118, it changes to this. What did he do between 117 and 118? Change what? They're still built on fully diminished 7, but what did he change? Question is, what changed between this chord with the C in the bass and this chord with the B sharp in the bass?
Conversion.
Just an inversion. Same exact chord, changed from a 4-2 to a root position. And then the last question asks you about there's a passage in 127 at the very end there. With the scale going down and then coming right back up and continuing up, that pattern occurs 2 more times. And in the interest of time, I will tell you 2 other places, and they are transposed. The first one, this measures 17 through 19, and the second one is 94 through 96. If you find any more, let me know. That's it. I will post some homework in D2L and mail it out tonight.